Hello again. We are Chris Lee and Chase Robinson of Southeastern 16 here to talk Kentucky football after the Cats have beaten Ole Miss and maybe reshaped the outlook for its season. We'll talk about what we thought Kentucky was and what's ahead. First of all, Chase, let's talk about perception of Kentucky coming in. I think we both hung our hat on this defense being elite. And so far, Kentucky has done nothing to dissuade us from that. In fact, I would say there's even a little bit more out there for the Cats. They haven't forced a ton of turnovers, which they can do. But I think Kentucky's defense so far has been everything we hoped it would be.
I think so. And again, we had our questions after the South Carolina game, but you look at the rest of the season for Kentucky and their defense. They pitched a shutout against Southern Miss. They did give up 31 to South Carolina, 13 to Georgia, 6 to Ohio, and 17 to Ole Miss. And I circled the Georgia game and the Ole Miss game because those are two really good opponents that, again, only let Georgia score 13. Ole Miss only scored 17. Those are two really good offenses. So I think that shows that the Kentucky defense is getting better. They've shown a lot of improvement, and they look elite. They really do. They're making really key stops at really good times, and I think that's definitely going to help Kentucky moving through the rest of the year.
Well, and even the 31 they gave up to South Carolina, misleading because the offense was so bad, which leads me to the next point. I would have thought Kentucky's offense would have been a lot better with Brock Vandagriff. Those receivers just it really struggled so far. Just some yards per play number. Southern Miss 7.5, Ohio 7.2. You know, fine, I guess, under the conditions of who you play, but not great. The good teams, and these are three elite defenses. South Carolina 2.9 per play, Georgia 3.9, Ole Miss 4.5. Now, the good news, I guess, is that's in order in which the games were played. So there's been some improvement there, not what you wanted, but I guess that's the silver lining is you feel like the defense or the offense really can't play much worse than it's played so far.
Yeah, that's been the part I wasn't expecting that. I thought they would be better offensively than they are. I think the defense is going to keep them in games and provide the offense a little more room because the defense is gonna be able to stop teams, from putting up big points. They can maybe have some lower scoring games, but yeah, we need to see more out of Brock Vandagriff in the offense. And yeah, you're right. The numbers have improved week by week, but I think we still need to see more from this offense, and especially the rest of the schedule they have. They're going to need to score points. The defense can only do so much, so I'd like to see more out of the offense in this the next part of the season.
Next part of the season is what we're going to look to, Chase, and I'll have you pull up the graphic so we can kind of take a guess at where Kentucky may stand in terms of what they might be favored or an underdog by in the games ahead. And we'll get into the details of this. But anyway, first of all, this is brought to you by BetOnline, the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything football. BetOnline has every stat, every matchup, even live odds and spreads to bet on during the games. You can, I think, bet on season win totals too. And I think at this point, we'll unpack what we think our season win total will be when it's all said and done. But I think 3-2, what we expected the Cats to be, even if it's a different 3-2 in terms of who Kentucky beat and lost to. Are you with me
definitely.
here?
Yeah, definitely thought would have been a different 3-2, but hey, they're 3-2 regardless.
Well, if you think you know your stuff, get in on our $200,000 mega contest. Pick 5 games against the spread every week for your chance at weekly prizes and a share of $200,000 when the game's over. Head on over to our online casino. Get in on a game of blackjack or poker or unwind with one of over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on all the action. BetOnline, the game starts here. All right, I'm going to unpack what we're looking at. Obviously, 5 games in the books for Kentucky. The prediction column here, that is what Kentucky, according to my computer model, was going to be favored by or an underdog by, which ended up being pretty close to the lines. And BetOnline, we don't have odds out for the next game yet on Vanderbilt that I know. We'll, of course, let you know when we preview that game on the channel later. But you can see the results, how Kentucky did. Obviously, nobody expected Kentucky to give Georgia a game. And Kentucky nearly won that. Same thing with the Ole Miss game. But what's interesting here, if you look in the Kentucky column, you can see how many points above Kentucky was and below average coming to each game. And boy, did it ever bounce around. Low point after that South Carolina game, their power ranking dropped a whole 5 points, recovered a little bit after Georgia, same after Ohio. And after Ole Miss, you can see looking forward, Kentucky is nearly 11 points per average or above average in all the games. The ratings of their opponents out to the right. So you can get an idea of where Kentucky might be favored or an underdog. And what I'm seeing here, Chase, Kentucky's going to be a pretty solid favorite over Vanderbilt. They'll run away with the Murray State game unless something goes crazy. Now a solid favorite over Auburn now, and that number could be even bigger depending on what Auburn does. They were a solid, or not a solid, but a slight favorite at Florida. Hard to win on the road in the league. So you can see how expectations have probably changed a little bit. And even the Louisville game, Kentucky's going to be about a 1-point underdog, according to this. Suddenly some games that maybe Kentucky might have been an underdog in going into the season, the Cats are now favored or within striking distance of being a favorite.
Yeah, I think this Ole Miss game kind of changes the perception of Kentucky. Getting that win, Ole Miss was a big favorite over Kentucky, and so yeah, I think it does change things, and I think this defense changes things. They've got some good offenses that they're going to be playing against, starting with Vanderbilt next week after the bye week. With Diego Pavia, who's able to move the ball really well. And so that's going to be a challenge for Kentucky. But then you look, you got Auburn, you got Tennessee, Texas, Louisville. Those are really good offenses that this defense is going to be tasked with. And I think this defense is good enough to keep Kentucky in these games, And so, I think if you divide the schedule up into 3 sections, kind of where the bye weeks fall, I thought they did really good getting 3 wins in this first section of 5 games. Then you go into the second section with Vandy, Florida, Auburn, and Tennessee. I think 3 of those 4 are very winnable, and I think they'll be favored. And according to your model, they will be. I think those are 3 very winnable games against some good teams. And then you get into that last section, it's tough with Texas and Louisville. I think Louisville is a winnable game this year, it should be a very close margin there between Kentucky and Louisville in a rivalry game. They get that one at home. I think that'll help. So I think Kentucky is in a very good position, and they've got some momentum right now. Even with a loss to Georgia, it's a 1-point loss. That can give you some momentum, and I think they're starting to hit their stride. You mentioned the numbers get better every week. That's what you want to see is improvement. They are improving. They're able to have an extra week now to kind of correct some things, maybe offensively, to get things rolling and simplified. But I think Kentucky is in a really good position right now.
Yeah, I think if you just want to follow a team week in and week out because the games are interesting, I think Kentucky would be at the top of the list of teams that I might pick to watch. I mean, the Vanderbilt, okay, let's get this out of the way. The Murray State game is going to be a runaway. We saw what happened when they played Missouri, but that is about the only thing that I think is a given. You could say, okay, Vanderbilt, they're going to be a double-digit favorite, and they should be, but last time Vanderbilt went to Lexington, it won that game, and Diego Pavia makes it tricky, as Missouri kind of found out before hanging on for a double overtime win. So even that one, I think Kentucky will win, but it's kind of interesting for its own reasons. At Florida, Florida's got a good offense, 2 good quarterbacks, and defensively they're not great. I think Kentucky could potentially have a little bit of a breakout, but it's about a 2-point game according to our model. Auburn should win that game. That's in Lexington. Auburn could be at the point where a season is falling apart. But Auburn also, when it's not throwing interceptions, it is a very productive passing offense. Yep. So that one, I mean, Auburn is a very high variance team right now. So I think even those 3 games are interesting in their own way. Okay, Tennessee, they're going to be a double-digit underdog in Knoxville. But I think the most similar team to Tennessee is Ole Miss, in terms of running a high-tempo offense, liking to run it a lot, running it well, having a lot of weapons. I'm not saying they're the same team, but if you want to pick 2 teams that are very similar, Tennessee is the most similar opponent to Ole Miss. Well, it's in Knoxville. Okay, well, the Ole Miss game was in Oxford. I think that the next 4 games before their next bye are very interesting for all those reasons.
I think so too. And again, it's a tough road for Kentucky, but I think they've proved that they can step up to the challenge. I mean, this is a challenging schedule with Georgia, Ole Miss, Tennessee, and Texas, just to name 4 of their opponents. But then you throw in Auburn and Vanderbilt in there as well. South Carolina earlier in the year, we saw how that one went. But this is a tough schedule. But I think they've proved they can hold their own. They can play with anybody.
Yeah, well, and even after the last 2 games, at Texas, when you can hold a team down, when you can hold Georgia to 13 points, you don't have to score a lot to win. You hold Ole Miss to 17. Maybe they do the same thing to Texas, keep that one interesting late in the fourth quarter. And Louisville, they just have dominated that series in the win column recently.
Yeah, and I think you bring up a good point there. If they could just hold these high-powered offenses to a low score, that the advantage is in their the ball's in their court. I feel like they held Georgia to 13. They held Ole Miss to 17. If they can hold these teams that like to score a lot of points and control the tempo of the game and let the game flow how Kentucky wants it to flow, that's what I feel like that's the key to Kentucky's success this year is control the game.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, and you want the number of plays probably to be held down if you're Kentucky. You don't want to get in one of these, shootouts where your your defense is on the play on the field. And that's one thing they've done really well. I don't know what their average is after the Ole Miss game, but their defense was on the field for like 48 plays a game. Coming into Ole Miss, we circle that as a key. Now, look, that's cheating a little bit because you didn't play 40% of the Southern Miss game, and that brought that down a little bit. But still,
right?
You add back that in, maybe you're averaging 52, 53, 54 plays a game. That's still a low number. I think the style thing is where they're interesting because they can sort of get you into a little bit of a football version of a rock fight, and they've been successful winning one of those games once already, and darn near pulled another shocker.
Yeah, and I feel like that's the kind of ball Kentucky is going to play, and I think it's going to be very fascinating to see what Kentucky is able to do the rest of the way out with the schedule that we have here in front of us. That is not an easy road.
If you're putting a win total on what they exit the regular season with, what is it?
Well, probably 7.
Yeah,
maybe 8.
I'd like to go 7.5 because I think, like let's say you give them Florida, Auburn, and Vandy, you're still underdogs in 3 more games. That's 7, but I'm like, well, we know they can beat Louisville. But then we've also seen them stumble against some of those other teams. I mean, Auburn could playing away from home might even be the best thing for Auburn at points. We talked about the Vanderbilt game. I think 7.5 is about where I put it because I feel like this team's getting a little bit better. But boy, there aren't 5 teams in the country probably that have tougher slates going forward than Kentucky.
You're right. You're very right, and it's a tough road. But look, Kentucky showed they're up for the challenge.
Yeah, well, we'll be here to cover the Cats one way or the other. We do football, baseball, basketball year-round. Best way to get that, hit the subscribe button. That is free. Hit the like button. That helps our analytics. Tell a friend. Advertising inquiries, caroline.smith@southeastern14.com. We do content all the time, and we reach millions every year. And anyway, thanks for watching our video. We'll be back to cover the Cats after their next game as we do SEC wrap-ups every Saturday night. Power rankings on Monday. Come back and see where we've got them. For Chase Robinson, I'm Chris Lee. You've been watching Southeastern 16 presented by BetOnline.